great movies. But I have to ask you about a TV show that's a legend here in Czech Republic. A show from the time of ancient gods, warlords and kings. When the land in turmoil cried for a hero, and her name was Xena.
No, Jason got that role as well. Okay, Xena, yeah.
You played Marc Anthony, and in the Anthony and Cleopatra episode, when Xena, well, sorry, in Czech it's Xena. We don't call her Xena, but Xena. And she falls in love with you, with Anthony. Do you remember anything from that shooting?
Oh, absolutely. You know, is anybody aware of that? Who's aware of the Xena show? Was there?
Yeah!
Okay, so who's aware that I was on an episode of it? Don't you remember the Marc Anthony episode? I was Marc Anthony. And to be honest, it was the first role that I ever got that I went, oh my, what? I've got a real role. Like, you know, like I've gotten some big parts on cop shows. I died 4 times, something or whatever. You know, but nothing was ever a really substantial role. And I remember going along to the audition and lying about how tall I was. Because I knew Lucy Lawless was like, you know, whatever, it was a myth, you know, it was a myth. People, hey Spidey, I can see you sneaking out there, kid. See you later, Spider-Man. And in any case, it was. I mean, Xena was very big at the time. You know, it was an American thing. You know, it was an American audience. So you know, I went in and I was so excited about actually reading for something quite substantial. And then, yeah, I mean, you know, as an actor, you kind of know at the audition. I've learned this. I've learned that you know at the audition. I don't know. You know. And yeah, I just did this audition. It just felt so good. And the casting agent, Liz Mullen, just went, oh, that was awesome. We're going to send it away straight away. So, but I lied about my height. And when I got there, my pants were too long. The wardrobe lady is actually married to my cousin, who's a Bennett. The Bennetts in my family, nobody's over 6 foot. We're all 5'11", you know, maybe 5'10". I'm still wearing cowboy boots. But it was, but she went, you know what, when I heard you were coming over, I thought, none of the Bennetts were. It was quite funny, but it was an incredible role, you know, and I got to work with Lucy Lawless. Now, here's the really important thing about landing the role in Xena in I think it was 1999, right? The really important thing about landing that role was that Rob Tapert became Lucy Lawless's husband. And Rob Tapert, 10 years later, made Spartacus. And if it wasn't for Spartacus, I wouldn't have gotten The Hobbit, and I wouldn't have gotten Arrow, and I wouldn't have gotten a lot of things. I got recognized for being in Spartacus. So when I was on the Xena episode, there was one particular fight scene where the Romans came out, and I'm like, how many kids are in the audience? If I talk about Spartacus or anything like that. Anyway, I'm with Lucy Lawless, okay, and we're doing our thing. And it's funny because then Rob cast me with Lucy again in Spartacus. I was like, just invite me around to the house, Rob. but anyway, so we're on the ground, and suddenly these Romans come out, right? And I sort of like, Xena, just step out of the way, I'm Marc Anthony. I'll kick their butts, you know? And so I come in with this swords scene, and the swords that they were using were made from like, kind of like a really soft rubber that had a sort of a metal kind of thing, but it would bend. If you hit the swords, they'd bend. We had the same problem on Spartacus for a while, and so they ended up making about 4 different type of weights of swords so that, you know, they would be more robust. But in this particular fight scene, in the middle of it, the swords were all bending, so I said to the stunt guys, I said, listen, let's get the swords that are the harder ones, and let's just go for it. You know, I mean, let's not miss, and let's just hit each other, you know? And all the stunt guys in New Zealand, you know, they're all pretty tough blokes, and they'll do anything, you know, they'll do anything. And anyway, so we ran into this fight scene, and it was just like, you know, and this woman that was on the side of the set, the safety woman was like, stop, what are you guys doing? And we stopped, right? And they went, it's Manu. I was like, but in any case, it ended up being a really, really good episode. It was a very, very dramatic episode, and as a result of that, 10 years later, Rob Tappert rings me up. And at the time, I was sitting with my first daughter in a pram at a zoo in a bird aviary, wondering how the hell I was going to feed this baby, because I was an out-of-work actor, you know, and I was really having a tough time, kind of thinking like, am I going to make it through the eye of the needle, you know? And I remember just hearing these bird noises in this aviary and deep in thought about my daughter. And the phone rings. And Rob Tappert's from Texas. And he always calls me Manu. Manu. And I hadn't talked to Rob Tappert since Xena 10 years beforehand. So I wasn't expecting his voice on the other end of the line. I'd auditioned. As a matter of fact, for Spartacus, I'd auditioned for Spartacus, then I'd auditioned for Enemaus, and then Barker. And I'd lost so many roles that I was so disheartened that I'd never get into this series. And then one day my German manager rang up and she goes, Manu, we have an audition for you. It's Grixas. And I think she went like, it's Grixas, or something like this. And I was like, okay. Anyway, so I'd gone along to these auditions and done well, but lost these roles. And then she rang up and then she said, you know, this Grixas role. So I'd gone in, auditioned for it, and I hadn't heard for like 2 months. And so I'm sitting in this bird aviary, and the phone rings, and I answer it. It's like, Manu, it's Rob Tappert. You know, from Xena. You slept with my wife. Manu, we'd just like to say that I'm one of the producers on Spartacus, and we've all viewed your tape, and we all thought it was very good, but we can't offer you the job. And I'm just thinking to myself, like, what the hell are you calling me for? You're just rubbing it in. You're rubbing it. And then he went, Manu, I can't offer you the job, because do you remember back on Xena, in that fight scene, you started hitting all of our stunt guys. Do you remember that, Manu? I guess not. Well, you have to promise me that you are not going to hurt our Spartacus. Okay. Okay, Rob, I promise. And I remember these next words. It makes me cry, actually, when I think about it, because it changed my life. He went, Manu, welcome to Spartacus.
Oh, that's very good.